It's a huge mindset that you're chasing this thing and needing to catch up and show up because that's what everybody is expecting, as well as the Instagram algorithm.
Welcome back to Duo On Air. I'm Abby.
And I'm Courtney.
And we're the ex-agency turned entrepreneurial team that puts the Duo in Duo Collective. Our boutique organic marketing agency specializes in SEO, social media strategy, and branding.
We're an everyday pair of business besties / marketing experts obsessed with helping our community learn more about what it takes to run a business.
Which is why on Duo On Air, we're not holding anything back. We're giving you all the info we know about how to grow your business organically so you can be the confident CEO you were made to be.
And how to navigate life as a small business owner.
Whether it's on your own or with your best friend by your side, so grab your coffee
or your mimosa, we don't judge,
and settle in for a quick value-packed episode of Marketing Tips. Welcome back to the Duo On Air podcast. This is episode number 54, and today we're chatting about how to find the motivation you need to be consistent with your posting. This is a question we get all the time, or not even a question, just like I have to post more, or I haven't been posting. How do you post every day? How do you share reels as often as you do? Which is kind of funny because we've gotten these questions in the past, but lately we haven't been
We have not been a very good example of this currently.
But we are a good example of real life, I would say. And I think
that's what people appreciate about us and our brand. But
yeah, it's not about just trying to post a certain number every single week. Like, it's really good to have a goal and a base and know what you're working towards. But I think there is an insane amount of pressure that we put on ourselves to show up without always the reason why. Why are you doing it? And also understanding what your goals are. Like, what are you hoping to get out of it? Because it might feel really good when a reel hits a certain number of impressions and you're like, great, that reel's performing really well. But what does that do for you? And
what does it do for your business?
Yeah.
How does it drive business forward? Mm-hmm. And I think that's a thing that a lot of people tend to not look at. They just look at what we like to call those vanity metrics, and they get really excited about a reel that has 10,000 plus views, but that's all that happens there. They don't necessarily look at the insights. They don't stop to ask, well, how did that benefit my business? Did it benefit my business? Or am I just excited about a vanity metric? So I think it all comes down to kind of, like Abby said, your goals and what that consistency looks like. And I think the question that people have is, how often should I be posting? How often should I be showing up? All of that stuff. And everybody is doing it for Instagram. I think a lot of people fail to stop and think about their actual audience and the content that they're creating and how their audience is engaging with that content, if the audience is, liking that actual content, if it's beneficial. So I think you need to take a step back, and instead of doing it for Instagram and the algorithm, you need to make sure that you're doing it for your current audience or for who you want to attract. So I think that's the biggest thing, is that people feel so much pressure to show up for Instagram, not necessarily for their actual audience.
And one of the first things we do with most of our clients too, depending on what we're working on, and especially with a lot of our mastermind clients, is setting those priority goals by platform. So I know we're going to, the second we bring that up is how do you find the motivation to be consistent posting? Everyone thinks Instagram. Everyone's like, yeah, I need to be posting more on Instagram. But you need to be showing up in all the places that you're dedicating and putting your energy. What are your priority platforms? Is it Instagram and email? Now back into how consistently are you going to show up? It's not about posting every day, sharing an email every day. It's about consistency and how realistically asking yourself the question of how much can I show up consistently and feeling good about it. And so we've outlined this for our business of right now our podcast is once a week. Would we love to do it more? Absolutely. Right now it's once a week because that's realistic for us. Email, once a week. We will sometimes have other iterations of sales emails come in, but we are set to once a week. We've also set the rule for ourselves for social that we're not posting on the weekends anymore. It was draining both of us and we didn't see the benefit. And so it's just something where you can set those goals and then you just shoot for consistency and you try not to beat yourself up when you can't hit it, because we're all human and that happens and everyone understands. And if it will make you feel better, even for example, for our podcast, the week that we didn't do a podcast episode was the week that my dog passed. And we were humans about it. And we were just like, I can't do this right now. Like, I need to just be with my family and be home. And so it's a situation where if you feel like just not showing up, it's showing up is going to not serve you right now, and you want to make sure you still feel good about it, then just have that transparency with your audience and be authentic and say why, like what's going on.
And I think that week too, more people wanted to show up for Abby emotionally and support her that way versus sitting there and waiting for our next podcast episode. They knew that it was going to come out that next week. They knew that, we were going to be back to our regularly scheduled content as soon as we could. But I think being authentic and having that transparency is super important. Also, along with consistency, I think it's being intentional too with the content and the posts that you put out there. If you have a really busy week and you feel like you need to post, so you're just posting to post and you're putting things out there that aren't relevant or just kind of taking up space on your Instagram grid, that's not usually going to benefit you. Do Abby and I do this every once in a while? I'm pretty sure I just posted like a coffee post like last Friday because we, again, have not been a great example of consistency at the moment. But I just was kind of like, gosh, we just need to show up a little bit, even if it's something not super relevant to the content that we normally post. And that's okay sometimes to fill in those blanks, but don't get into that habit week after week because you feel like you just need to show up on the platform, because that's not going to benefit you. Having that intention behind the content that you're posting with that consistency is going to be your best opportunity for growth, for engagement, and for how you want to show up on that platform.
Yeah. And say you set this rule, you're like, I'm going to post 4 times a week on Instagram, and you discover that 2 of those posts are just what Court said, posting just to post. And that's 2 of them, and they're not really serving you. It's taking up your time, your sanity, your stress levels go higher because of it. Then maybe you should just post twice a week. Like, just stop putting that expectation on yourself to show up as often when it's not serving you or driving the results that you need. So we get this, we like to use like this analogy a lot of when people ask us the question of how often should I be posting? Should I be posting every day? And we always like to say, like, say you and your neighbor decide that you're going to run a marathon together, and your neighbor decides that they are going to run every day, and you decide that you can only run 3 days a week. I bet you by the time you both get to that starting line, your neighbor is most likely going to make it to the finish line before you. You might still make it there, but it's going to take you a little bit longer. The same goes with Instagram. If you are comparing yourself to someone who is posting 2 to 3 reels a day and their growth is scaling at a level that you just can't understand and you're beating yourself up as to why you're not growing as quickly, it's because you're not showing up as often. But that doesn't mean that they are the pinnacle goal of what you should be doing. It just means you need to have a little bit more realistic examples of people out there that you can follow where you can monitor growth from a realistic standpoint.
I think too, when we think about social media, we feel the pressure to show up every day, constantly, all the time, no matter what. Like, we just have to show our faces. And it's a very unhealthy relationship, actually. There have been times where I've loved Instagram for our business, for my personal life, and then there's been times where I've absolutely loathed it because I felt this unneeded pressure to constantly show up, and like I needed to put everything aside and focus all of my energy on social, because that's the mindset that we are kind of put into with this social space and like what people think the algorithm craves. But if you have an unhealthy relationship with social or any sort of platform like this, you are going to start to dislike it very much. And that's going to make you push it away. And the more you push it away, the more you're going to feel good about not, having to dedicate your life to it. But then you're going to start feeling guilty because you're not showing up. So it's really about finding that balance. And again, all of these things like consistency, intentionality, goals, like simple goals, I think are how you're going to have a healthy relationship with social. Because I think a lot of more people listening to this probably than not have unhealthy relationships with social. I think we're all to blame at some point in our lives for that relationship. And if you start to think about it as a relationship instead of a tool necessarily, you can start to work on that and change that and make it healthy and make it work for you and make it not so much of a burden and something that you hate showing up for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of feel like there are 3 things that, like, when we are in a really like healthy state, especially with Instagram, there are kind of 3 things that motivate us. And one is creating content we feel really good about, like content that aligns with our strategy, content that is speaking to like our knowledge, sharing our experience. Like, I think a lot of people are scared to share too much because they feel like they're giving away too much, rather than thinking of it as an opportunity to showcase your expertise in that area of work. People really value that. So I know we feel really good when we're sharing content that is really valuable. And then second, we feel really good and more motivated to continue posting when that content's received well, when people comment, when people engage, when people actually resonate with the content we're sharing. And the reason why that works is because, one, we're creating content that has a strategy. And then third, we feel really good when we're ahead and we're caught up. We never feel motivated when we're working from this state of like always feeling like you're catching up. And I think it's so easy. Like, for example, right now for us, we haven't been very consistent. And it's so easy to be like, I need to catch up. And that's the mindset, rather than the mindset being like, it's a fresh week. Next week will be a fresh week. Let's start fresh from that week moving forward, rather than feeling like we're always catching up. And I feel like when those 3 things are in harmony, you are more motivated to keep going, rather than feeling like you're not doing what you said you do.
I feel like Abby just tapped into my brain, because my brain is literally in the I need to catch up with social, which is, it's not a great feeling at all, because you do go into the week thinking like, okay, I'm going to catch up, and that's your mindset, versus like, hey, it's a fresh week. Like, how do we want to tackle this week as far as our content goes? But instead you're in the mindset of like, oh my gosh, I have so much to do. I need to catch up. Plus I've got all these client deliverables. So I think, like Abby said, it's a huge mindset thing too, on, just how you show up and when you show up, versus constantly thinking that you're chasing this thing and needing to catch up and show up because that's what everybody is expecting, as well as the Instagram algorithm.
Yeah. And sometimes even like Monday, you can be like, okay, I have like, it's a fresh week, but I still feel busy. I still feel like I'm going to be behind. Then it's like, create content for the next week. Who says you have to start that Monday? Start ahead, create content for the next week. So then every week you get into this like mindset mentality of like feeling ahead rather than feeling behind, which ultimately is motivating, right?
Okay, I'm going to do that this week, Abby, because I literally think that's going to be healthy for me, because I'm totally in the mindset of like, oh shit, I need to catch up.
Sometimes we do these podcast episodes for us, you guys, not just for you.
This is like a little therapy session for me, actually. I'm starting to be able to breathe a little bit easier.
I love it.
I also, we've talked about these tools before in the past, but things like Tailwind and Planoly, these can be lifesavers for platforms like this, because instead of me catching up this week, I'm going to make content for next week, you guys. So you're all going to hold me accountable. This little podcast episode. But
by the time this is live, it will
we
be
better
consistent.
Yes,
there you go.
Exactly. There we go. But using these tools is so nice too, because when you have your content developed and the assets that you're going to use as far as photography or created templates, you can go ahead and put those all into these tools and set it up so that they automatically post for you. So that's just one of, it's taking a major step out of the process for you. So again, helping you create that healthy relationship with these platforms, and just a little bit less work for you to do behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. So it kind of takes some of those struggles out of it by helping you create that content, get it all scheduled, and you can kind of forget about it. Now, we always say don't let it post and ghost. You still want to show up and engage, but thinking about taking out the process of actually posting is a nice little benefit with these different platforms that you can tap into.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one more thing too that I was really good at last year that I kind of just have failed this year, but start now. I set time limits on all of my apps, so that, especially social apps, so that I was not in the platform mindlessly. And it was really good when I did it, because it made me realize how often I open up the Instagram app with no objective in mind. I'm just opening it as like a numbing thing to do. Like, oh, I'm bored, open up the app, which it's a habit then that your brain has tied to it of like, you have nothing to do right now. Your phone's in front of you, open the app. And that's something that I think you don't realize until you have like a barrier that you have to be conscious of, like a time limit, how often you do it. And so that was something where it was funny because the days that I was like, okay, I have to edit this reel, I would use all of my time limit just to create this content. And then I'd be like, Court, I'm tapped out. Your turn, jump in. It's crazy how much time sometimes things can take. Not all the time, but it kind of depends on what you're doing. So it was just really helpful because I think as a business owner, we put so much on our plate for content creation that we forget about the actual work, and the time limits really like draw you back in to be like, okay, you've spent enough time creating content today, you're done, do something else. And I think sometimes we need those reminders. So that's definitely something I'm gonna reinforce for 2023, setting back up those limits.
I have those on my phone now, but I've been a really horrible example of it because Instagram will like prompt me and they'll be like, your time's up. Do you want more time or do you want to exit the app or something like that? And I'm just like, not now. Like, I don't want to exit. And I'm like, oh, this is so bad, Courtney. You're literally breaking all of your rules. But at least, I mean, you can break your rules every once in a while, but at least you still have that safeguard there. And Instagram's constantly popping up and saying like, hey, like you've been on this app for 5 hours, maybe you should get off and do something. Mm-hmm. So those are super, super important. Also, shutting off notifications. I don't know. This is something that I've recently done the past year, and that is so beneficial. Even notifications for like, let's say your personal life stuff. So I'm on Snapchat for my personal life. We don't have Snapchat for Duo, but I shut off all notifications for that because if I had constant notifications coming in, personal life on top of, let's say I had notifications for, Duo, Instagram coming in all throughout the day, those are such huge distractions from your workday. And you feel like you need to jump on and look at that Snap or look at that Instagram engagement like right there and then. And that's not the case. You don't need to respond immediately in these spaces. You can post in the morning and, engage for 15 minutes and then not engage again until later that night or the next day even. It's not something that you constantly have to be on every time that somebody sends through some sort of a notification on that social space.
Unless any doctors out there are listening to this episode, like everyone else on here, we are not saving lives. Like for us, it is really hard to remember, like we take pride in taking care of all of our clients that we work with. But at the end of the day, if we're not first taking care of ourselves, it's really hard to serve our clients in the best way possible. And there has to be barriers. There has to be boundaries. You need to take that moment to care for yourself rather than feeling always on. And this is a learned behavior. We have not mastered it. We practice it every single day, and some weeks and days are worse than others. But I think it's just so important to remember, like, is this a life-threatening reason why you need to hop on? Or can you say, I'm busy right now, I'll get to this later? Like most people just want to know that you are on their radar and that you will be taking time to think about it. But that reel you want to post right at this moment isn't saving a life. It's something that if it goes live 2 hours after you might have wanted it to, that's okay. So
absolutely.
So we've covered a lot of different things in this episode, but hopefully this gave you some motivation or just some form of finding your own consistency, because there is no perfect equation. And if you have had any revelations on this podcast episode, we would love to hear them. So please share them with us.
If you like this episode, please be sure to share it with a friend and subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes dropping every Monday. Plus, if you haven't already, please go ahead and leave us a review and don't hesitate to share any new episode ideas. We absolutely love hearing from you and creating this content for you. See you next week.